Okay, good morning, students. Let us today study about the nervous system. As you know, nervous system is a communication that is allowed to travel to the body, especially to the brain, and brain responds accordingly. Billions of nervous cells, it's called neuron, are there in our body in order to take the response, and the neural activity is very critically important in order to have and to maintain homeostasis in our body. So, what's the general nervous system functions looks like? When there is a impulse in a receptor, or it can be internal or can be an external, there is an impulse which is carried by a neuron cell. A neuron cell is joined into many other neural cells, and finally, from the peripheral neural system, it enters into the spinal cord and then to the brain, and the brain stores and even have a response on previous learning experience. So, the nervous system works on both the systems, the central nervous system, a peripheral nervous system. Central nervous system consists of brain and spinal cord, whereas peripheral nervous systems consist of all the external and the internal organs or the external stimuli. So, how does a structure of a neurons looks like? It has three parts of a. It is divided into, or you can say, it divided into three regions. That is cell body, dendrites, and action. Okay, this is how a neuron looks like. The terminal nerve, which is, say, for example, attached to a skin, now this uh, travels, the impulse travels through the axon, that is containing myelin sheath and neurolemma, enters into the cell body called dendrites. Now the dendrites is joined with another neurons, and so with millions of neurons, making a bundles, that is neural bundles, and then they enters the spinal cord and finally to the brain. So let us see the how the neurons are attached to each other, the way you can see how they are attached to each other. And now see, when a neuron, one message is transferred from an external or an internal stimuli, the message goes from one nerve cell to another nerve cell. There is a contact point between an axon of one of the neuron and the dendrites. Wherever the dendrites is ending, there is another axon is attached to the dendron. Almost attached, or there is a very small microscopic gap in them, and that is how the chemical transmission occurs from one cell to another, and this process is called synapse. Look at the neurotransmitters from one nerve cells. As you can see from the axon body to cyton, which is the cell body, and from there it is again attached to another axon uh, ending with a small gap in them, and this is how the neuron transmit their message. Of course, this message is actually uh, transmitted with the help of neurotransmitters, especially the acetylcholines, noradrenalines, and glutamic acid. Now, what happens over here is a stimulus is received by a neuron, travels through in a form of an electric disturbance. Now, I'll show you how this immediately how the polarization occurs and the entry of the sodium ions is seen. Now you can see that the stimulus is received. Let me go to the slides. See what happens when there is a message is received from an absent terminal. The stimulus is received by a neuron, and there is a disturbance. During the rest, as you can see in A, it is written there is a disturbance from the outer surface of the neuron, which is positively charged, and the interior has a negative charge. Now the stimulus causes opening of the ions and make the outer surface the negative charge while the interior become positive. Now this creates an impulse and which moves forwards. As you can see, when there is a disturbance, there is a positive charge. With the help of these acetylcholines and the other non-adrenalines and other chemicals, it is depolarized. Now, so immediately the depolarized start going inside, and the rest part become repolarized, and then come to a resting stage. So it moves very fast. I mean, in an electrifying speed, that is, it reaches bundles to the spinal cord and finally to the brain through the sensory nerves. And this is how is the internal structure of nerves looks like. You can see the microfilaments which are covered by this myelin sheath. This myelin sheath are very extremely important in the nervous system because they help in the conductions of the messages that are going to the brain. If this is lost, then the message to the brain is affected. So, uh, how do the reflexes occurs into the central nervous system? So, suppose there is a pathway of a stimulus. The moment there is a stimulus, it can be an external or can be an internal. It moves to the dendrites, and then it moves to the number of dendrites bundles together through a sensory neuron to the brain through spinal cord. Now here the brain realizes it and it receives the message from a receptors into the brain. Now the brain will respond through the motor nerves to the external areas of muscles where the action can be taken place. This receptor which provide the central nervous system with the informations about the body position are called proprioceptor. Now, how does this reflex actions takes place? Just you can see in the figure. Now there is an external touch or somebody is touching. There can be a heat, can be a touch. It can be an internal organ also. Or how do they? I mean, moves immediately when there is a touch. This goes through the sensory nerves to the spinal cord and reaches the brain, and brain responds immediately through the interneurons through the efferent fibers that is called the motor nerves also to the muscles, and it acts accordingly. So this is how a reflex action takes place.